welcome to Solosaurus, a podcast about one-player board and card games. My name is Brandon Waite.
And my name is Carter Mackey.
And this is episode 45, where we're talking about a game about killing superheroes, The Reckoners from Nauvoo Games. If you are sick of superheroes and Marvel and everything else that's been coming out in the movie theater for the last 10 years, maybe this is your game. Maybe this is the way that you can release some of that pent-up anger. There's only one way to know for sure, and that's to review the game, which we will do in just a few minutes. But we are going to start like we usually do with the news. And actually, this week, we only have one bit of news because I looked through the news about solo games from this last week, and honestly, there's just not that much that was interesting to me. I think it's probably like the post-Essen lull. But there is one thing that caught my eye, and that is that there is a new expansion coming for Teotihuacan, which is kind of crazy because the last one, the late pre-classic period, just came out. But they've announced a new one called The Shadow of... Xitle? Zitle?
Zidle?
Zidle?
I don't know.
Yeah, The Shadow of Xitle.
Yeah.
That's not how it's pronounced. So I don't know how to pronounce the game, but I do know just a small amount about what it is supposed to do to the game. So apparently that X word is the name of a mountain that erupted. And I don't know if this is a real mountain or just one that they've made up. But this says the eruption of that mountain drives other people to the area around Teotihuacan, leading to the establishment of new technologies in that area. So basically what this is going to add is 10 new technologies and 10 new starting tiles, all of which are going to be compatible with solo play. And it's going to come out in 2020. That sounds like a pretty small expansion because by starting tiles, they mean those little skinny tiles that give you your starting resources and not like the player powers. And then the technologies are like the different things that you can put cubes on, know, to make you better, which is kind of nice because you're still only playing with 6 of them in a game and you have 10 in the base box. So, I mean, that's pretty significant, I think.
Give it a variety.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's pretty nice. It's just gonna, if you play a lot of Teotihuacan, and it looks like a lot of people are at this point, then you've got more variety coming to the game, which is pretty sweet, and I love that they made it all compatible with solo play. That's so smart. So, we haven't actually reviewed Teotihuacan on the show yet, but I can tell you that it's on my shelf right now, and I've played it several times, and you've played it once or twice?
Just once.
Just once.
Mm-hmm.
And, enjoyed it?
Yeah, no, I thought it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we'll probably do an in-depth review of it on the show because the solo mode for it is pretty cool and definitely worth checking out. And I know a lot of you all are interested in it. I just want to get a few more games in with the expansion that's already out before we review it. And yeah, it's pretty solid and still getting a lot of play from a lot of people. So if you are at all interested in expanding your game, keep your eyes open for The Shadows of that X word, a new expansion coming for Teotihuacan sometime next year. And that's all the news we've got for this week. If you want to see some of the other smaller news stories that came out after Essen, you can go to tablefor1.me, which is a site run by Frederick Schultz. That's where we normally find our news for this section of the show. Go there and check out all the latest stuff. That's all we've got for this segment, so we're just going to jump right into the review, which is for The Reckoners. The Reckoners is from designer Brett Sobel and Seth Van Orden. Comes to us from Nauvoo Games and came out in 2018. This was originally a Kickstarter game, but you can now find it at retail pretty easily. The Reckoners is a cooperative game based on a series of novels by Brandon Sanderson, who's famous for Mistborn and the Stormlight Archives. And this one is a little bit different. In this world, 10 years ago, some kind of astral event suddenly gives ordinary people superpowers. Unfortunately, every one of those people who gets the powers, who are now known as epics, they all turn out to be evil. And so you have these all-powerful beings that are basically ruling over everyone, and nobody resists them, especially Steelheart, the one who is running the city of New Chicago, which is an annoying way to say Chicago, except for a small band of freedom fighters known as the Reckoners. So in this game, you're going to take on the role of one of those Reckoners, researching the weaknesses of Steelheart and the other epics, containing the damage that they cause to the population, and biding your time until you can successfully assassinate them. That's the idea for this game, and full disclosure, I heard about this game, heard about the theme of it, and thought it sounded pretty cool, except for the word New Chicago, and decided I would read the books, and like, there's nothing else out there that's quite like this.
Yeah, it's a really different take on superheroes as far as I know.
Yeah, I like the idea that they're all evil. I like that the people that you're rooting for aren't the superheroes, but are ordinary people trying to assassinate them. There's just a lot of tension in that idea because they could very easily be killed. I mean, a lot of people get killed in those books because, these are powerful beings we're talking about here. And Steelheart, who is the main villain in this game, he's sort of the main enemy, at least in the first book, because I haven't read the whole series. And he is a bad dude. He is basically evil Superman. All that to say, I've read the books. I really like them. And I'm bringing that to my experience with this game, just so that you know that up front. But you have not read the books.
Right. I am not bringing any of that with me to this game.
So not having read the books, when you first come to this, does the theme intrigue you?
The theme is interesting, but it's not like it gets lost, but it has like the beginning page kind of tells you about, more of the theme and background, and then you're like into the game and the mechanics and everything.
Yeah. So even if you're not necessarily interested in the theme when you opened up the box, were you interested when you pulled the lid off the box and saw what was inside?
No, I don't think I was interested about the theme. I just wanted to get those big chunky components out.
Yeah, man, there is nothing else quite like this game components-wise on the market.
Yeah, it's got a lot of just really high-quality components and lots of high-quality game trays.
Yeah, so if you've not seen a picture of this game, you should, at some point after you've finished this episode, go and just Google an image of it just so you can see it for yourself. Basically, the publishers of this game partnered with Game Trays in a real big way, and not just to make an insert, but basically to make trays that are the player boards and pieces for this game.
Mm-hmm.
All the main board items are Game Trays inserts, and that means that like your player board has this black plastic tray that has a cool, like well illustrated cardboard cutout as part of it, and it holds dice and it holds like pieces that you need to keep track of things in the game. And basically it gives this game a table presence that is crazy and it feels lavish and overproduced, but also highly functional.
Yeah, it is all very, very functional. Yeah, now that you're saying that, there's not really a game board at all. It's all just these trays with like some cardboard put into the trays to like, add illustrations and art and things like that.
Yeah, basically you've got two main trays that sort of keep track of Steelheart and his health and all of that. Then you've got a board that keeps track of like the market and your money and the population that's slowly being destroyed by Steelheart.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a handful that are set up in kind of a circle in the middle of the table to represent the different sections of the city. And then you have the individual player boards. And that makes setup really easy because basically the pieces themselves are their own organizer.
Right. Yeah. You just pull the trays out, put them down, and you're almost good to go. There's very little left to do.
Yeah. There's a deck of cards. You're not using a deck of cards to manage like what happens on the AI's turn, which is really nice. Basically, you have the cards for the market, and that's pretty much it. So the whole game is basically these trays, a few miniatures to manage like where Steelheart is and where your characters are and where Steelheart's enforcement troops, or kind of like SS basically, where they are on the board. And then you have dice to manage your actions. And these might be my favorite dice.
They're really good. I don't know what my favorite dice would be. I'm not sure if these would be them, but they are big, chunky dice.
Yes. I do like D6s. Actually, that's what these are. So if we're excluding like the D12, which is the ideal die shape, these are big, chunky, like or rounded corner dice that are translucent with big, bold icons on them. And they come in different colors. And they just, if you just grab the dice, which I have done, I like set them all in a pile and just pick them up with both hands.
You animal.
I can't help myself. I did it with the Azul tiles too. It's so satisfying. I feel rich. I feel like a rich person.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess I've never been rich,
right.
so this is how I imagine they feel.
Right.
Like they're just picking up buckets of D6s all the time.
Right. Yeah, just this is your version of the Scrooge McDuck vault of just diving into piles of coins.
Yeah, if you dive into piles of coins, you'll break your neck, but you can pick up D6s and everything will be fine.
Right.
It's so good, y'all. The components are beautiful for this game. And what's really nice about this is each of the characters that you have to pick from has sort of their own specialty. and each one specializes in one of the different icons that appears on the dice, which represent like the 6 main actions that you can do on your turn. And what's nice about that is if you're particularly good in investigation or research, I guess, that has a purple icon, you're going to get 3 clear kind of basic dice, and then you're going to get 3 purple dice. I don't know what to tell you except that the purple dice are especially good at research, and it looks beautiful to play with them. I'm so pleased. My understanding is that if you get the Kickstarter edition of this game, the different tracker pieces and everything that come with the game are metal.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so a lot of people are only interested in picking up the Kickstarter version of the game because they're afraid they'll miss out on quality components. Like they don't want plastic. I think that's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, these are plastic components, but I mean, it's all, I would say like high quality plastic. All the plastic is like real chunky and feels like substantial. The tokens you're using for this research for each epic or the health of each epic, it just feels good to like slot it into the spot as you move it. I don't know. Nothing feels fiddly.
No, everything feels like it has its place. Like when you take actions in this game by rolling dice and choosing to use a die to take an action. When you take the action, you take this big chunky die and you slot it into a square on your player board that's perfectly suited for holding a die that shape. And there's just something so final about it and so satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
This is probably one of my favorite produced games. That's how I feel about it. Like it's up there with, in a very different way, with like Root and that sort of thing for me. But even Root is like, I like its wooden pieces. I think they're cool. This feels lavish and different. And to go along with that, I sort of expect when I look at a box that's this big, and it's quite big, I expect it's going to be a heavy game inside with a big rule book with a lot of rules to learn. I was pleasantly surprised to find that that is not the case because the rules for this game are pretty simple.
Yeah, I think it's 24 pages, which sounds longer than it feels. Like it's pretty easy to get through those rules.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would look at the rule book and be scared off, but it's really not bad. I'm increasingly don't have the patience to learn a huge, thick, overcomplicated rule book. This is not that at all. I think that if you have friends that are interested in playing board games and like games with theme, you could pull this out and they would see it on the table and say like, whoa, this is different and intriguing. And you wouldn't scare them off later when you started explaining the rules to them.
Right.
It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Actually, it feels a lot like a standard co-op kind of. If you've ever played a co-op game, which this is, a lot of this will be very familiar to you. You're going to take turns. The enemy's going to take turns, and it's going to happen until you lose or win. One thing that sometimes trips up cooperative games, I think, is making the AI's turn overcomplicated. One thing that I like about these rules is I feel like it explains what happens on the AI's turn pretty succinctly. And apart from having to look up a few icons every now and then and what icons mean, I didn't find myself flipping back and forth through the rulebook a lot. Yeah,
they're pretty easy to memorize. There's not too many of them, and it's pretty straightforward what to do on the AI's turn.
Yeah. So the fact that it has a good and simple rulebook, that leads us into a discussion of what the game plays like. And honestly, I was surprised by how kind of breezy the game feels in a way. And by that, I don't mean it's easy because it's hard.
Yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah, but it's not, it feels like kind of a light weeknight experience. I think I can set this up after a long day at work and feel like there's a lot to chew on, but it's not like playing Lisboa or playing, Anachrony or something like that, even though it's a big box game.
Yeah. And once again, it's so easy to actually just take out. I mean, I feel like you're almost just taking things out of the box and putting them on the table. It's not really, the setup part is so minimal.
Yeah, it's very easy to set up. And once you actually get it all set up, you don't have that much that you have to hold in your head at one time in terms of the different options that you have available to you. So basically what you're going to do is on your turn, every character starts with 3 special dice, 3 basic dice, a couple of starting items, and some money that they can spend to buy more items for the party. And the items are just cards that give you a small special ability. What you're going to do on your turn is you're going to roll the dice 3 times, similar to King of Tokyo or Yahtzee, basically. They just lifted that mechanic here and employed it. You're going to roll the dice the first time, look at what you've got, and you have to keep at least one of those dice. Then you have to roll it a second time. You can have to keep at least one. And then on your final one, whatever you've got left, you're definitely keeping. And those dice represent your actions for the turn. And basically, you're going to use those to move around the board and start to defeat Steelheart, the main enemy, and his minions, like these lower level epics, basically, that are plaguing the city, and his enforcement officers. So kind of like 3 tiers of enemies that you're dealing with throughout the course of the game. These dice give you the ability to do a handful of things. You can get some money. You're just going to use it to buy cards. And unlike a lot of games, I feel like the cards in this game are basically allowing you to use one of your dice to cash it in for a better version of what's on that die, or like a different kind of symbol. So for instance, there are cards in the game that might say like, place a money die here, and instead of getting 1 money, you'll get like 3 damage or something. It feels kind of combo-tastic in that way.
Yeah, it's just making everything you do better, giving you more options. It's a nice little like progression system as far as getting more powerful. And I would say it's relatively easy to keep acquiring these items at a normal clip.
Yeah, I mean, there's a good tension in the game of like, I don't want to use my dice for money because I really need to be killing things. Mm-hmm. But if you do spend the money on it, you're definitely going to be rewarded. But what's also nice is there's no limit to the number of items that you can have. So you can get a ton of these things if you really want to. And also, they're not that hard to attain, I guess. They're not like cost-wise out of reach or take multiple turns to get them or something like that. They have a pretty good range of prices from 1 money to 5 money or something like that. And it just feels like I can acquire pretty much whatever I want to in a turn or two if I'm really trying for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to me, that feels good pacing-wise.
Yeah.
So you can get dice that give you money. You can move around the board. You can kill enforcers, which are these little troops, basically, that build up on different parts of the board that are going to give you a hard time if you keep them out. Or you can do what is kind of the main meat of the game. You can research, do damage, or contain the epics. This is kind of the main part here because the epics are real bad news. Basically, after all of the players have had a chance to take their turn, the epics are going to take their turn, and the longer that they stay out on the board, the more powerful they get. To the point where if you're not really dealing with them, they're going to wreck you on their turn.
Yeah, as they keep getting more powerful, like they're just doing all sorts of bad things. They're either getting you closer to losing through just killing people, or they're just powering up the other epics, or powering up Steelheart is bad.
Yeah, basically there's so many ways that you can lose this game. One of them is if they just put out too many enforcement officers on the board, they'll damage your population directly. They will undo some of the work that you've already done in terms of like damaging epics or researching them. It's just a real pain in the neck. And the longer you let them sit out, the more of these abilities they gain. So you can use your dice to contain them, which is basically there's this little slide trackers on the epics card that kind of bracket off what abilities they have available to them at any given time. You can move that bracket down so that fewer abilities are visible, which is really sweet. Like it sometimes feels like you're just maintaining things when you take that action. But if you don't do it, you're just going to get
punishment
destroyed. So you're not doing a good thing necessarily. You're just keeping away the bad things for a little longer, which is not, for me, like kind of an ideal gaming experience. But for some reason, it feels a little more satisfying here than in other games because you can see just how bad the things are that are coming for you if you don't do it.
Yeah, you have a clear sense of this is exactly what's going to happen if I allow them to stay this powerful. And these are all the actions they're going to take. And those look bad to me.
Yeah, so it feels good when you can get rid of at least some of those things. The other 2 main actions that you have are like in the books, you can't just kill these epics. You have to find out what their weakness is. And so what you're doing here is you're trying to research the epics and try to get them to a place where you can kill them more easily. Some of them you have to research before you can kill them. They have infinite health. And until you find out what their weakness is by like assigning so many points of research to them, you're not going to be able to kill them and remove them from the board. That's definitely the case with Steelheart. You're not going to be able to even begin to damage him until you research him. But others, like they have a health bar, or you can research them. And if you research them, like 3 research, we'll say, then all of a sudden their health will move from maybe 8 points of health to 4 points. So research is kind of a mixed bag for me because it feels, in some cases, like you have to do it. But in the cases where you don't, it doesn't feel like it's necessary at all.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that if for some reason you get a bonus of a lot of research very easily with only spending 1 or 2 die, I can see where it makes sense because that's, translates to a lot of free damage. But other times it's almost like it would be the same. And I'm sure there's probably maybe some more nuance if you're really ramping up the difficulty, but generally speaking.
Yeah, I guess it just feels to me in those cases like, why wouldn't I just assign damage to these guys? Which is the last thing that you can do with your dice. You can just assign straight up damage to epics or to Steelheart if you've researched him enough. If you have the option, most of the time it's just better to assign the damage. One thing that does feel good about that is it sort of means like you're more flexible, right? So if you just keep rolling a bunch of research dice, it's not like they're useless to you.
Mm-hmm.
You can always use them at least to get Steelheart down so that you can start attacking him. Or if you've already researched Steelheart, then just apply it toward one of these other epics, One of the things that's good about this game is you don't feel powerless. You don't feel super strong like you do in Marvel Champions or Spirit Island or something like that. But it does feel like you are versatile.
Yes.
And that feels pretty good to me, especially when you're dealing with a system that is as punishing as this one.
Yeah, absolutely. One other thing about the research that I kind of wish was there is that, I don't know, there was some like narrative explanation maybe on the epics cards that said like, well, what weakness have you discovered? Because I think that does kind of detach from the theme. It's like, okay, well, I did the research and that's it. And now they're just weaker or they're exposed, but there's no like thematic justification.
Yeah, that's a good point because like in my mind, I've read the books and so I know a few of these characters and I know what their weakness was. And so my mind just kind of automatically inserts that because I remember that moment from the books when they found it. But if you haven't read the books, or when you encounter one of these epics that, like, I think there are several in here that don't appear in the books unless they did and I just forgot about them. That to me just feels like, oh, this person has no personality, is left to you to kind of substitute the theme there that's not being made explicit on the cards. The artwork does a good job of communicating something about them and who they are and what their powers are, but definitely not about their weakness.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of a bummer because that's sort of the whole point of the theme. You're researching them and killing them, and it can feel a little abstracted, I think. Similar to like, I never feel like I'm fighting disease and pandemic. I mean, the components in the new edition make me feel a little bit more that way, but I'm never like, oh, I found what's going to cure this disease. Yeah. I don't know. But this game, I sort of expected a little bit more, and it's just not quite there. But you need to be doing all this stuff because after you've taken your turns, which are taken simultaneously, by the way, which I really like. So if you do play this multiplayer, it's not like you have to figure out how to take all your actions, then the next person does it. Everybody just does it at once, which is a great idea. And I think makes it a little bit more collaborative, just naturally, like you're talking in real time about what you're all doing. All of that is necessary, and you're going to need that flexibility because these enemies are really hard. So after you take your turn, they're going to get a chance to activate. And unlike a lot of cooperative games where you have a deck of cards or dice or something that determines what the AI is going to do randomly, you can see ahead of time what's going to happen. And it's like watching a train coming toward you.
Yeah, you know exactly how bad the coming turn is going to be.
Oh, man. Basically, you're going to look at the icons that are revealed on these different epics, including Steelheart himself, and you're going to see all the ways that they're going to damage you and put out more enforcers and hurt the population. And it's rough, man. You can see all that coming. And on the one hand, I feel a little ambivalent about this. On the one hand, I think it's pretty cool that you can know up front what the enemy's going to do so you can prepare for it, right? Like that's good because when you just get hosed by random AI stuff, it doesn't feel great.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, when you are surprised by something that the AI does, which will happen from time to time, it's because you didn't take the time to sit and study all the different things that are going to happen and in what order they're going to happen. and it makes you feel bad because you didn't spend time reading enough or like working your way through the AI.
Yeah, just kind of mapping your way out
Yeah.
on what's going to happen when. And because, yeah, there were some definitely like really inefficient turns that I would make sometimes that were, it's like, oh yeah, I did that very wrong because I didn't stop and think about how this was going to play out.
Yeah. And I would say it's to the point where I think the primary weight of this game is you trying to keep in mind all the things that the AI is going to do on its turn. Or by that, I just mean like what the enemies are going to do on their turn and how you can head it off or respond to it. It's not so much like what cool things can I do this turn that will really put a hurt on the enemy. It's how can I mitigate what's going to happen in the next phase.
Yeah, it mostly feels like you're just mitigating.
Yeah, that's a different and almost more like old school kind of way of handling co-op games for me. That's not bad. It's just not so much what I'm really looking for in a co-op game anymore.
So do you have something in mind beyond Marvel Champions?
Yeah, so like obviously Marvel Champions, right? Because it makes you feel like a superhero as you play, and you can do some really big, cool things on your turn. I guess the main one that I think of is Spirit Island.
Right.
And again, some of this is just a difference in theme. You are playing a superhero or a deity, right? And so, of course, you should feel more powerful. You should feel like you're doing a lot. But like we said in our Spirit Island review, what I like so much about that game, and I guess it's true of Marvel Champions too, is the AI's turn is bad for you. Like, real bad. They make advancements and they do a lot of bad stuff. But on your turn, you feel like, okay, you've hurt me. I'm going to really bring the pain to you. To me, it doesn't ever feel in this game like, all right, now it's my turn to bring the pain.
Yeah, you don't feel like you're bringing the pain. You're just mitigating and trying to accumulate enough damage or research or whatever on Steelheart at like a quick enough pace before you lose.
Yeah, to like eke out a win.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I feel like in Spirit Island, for instance, which I'm just comparing them because I love Spirit Island so much, right? But there's this point where you turn from feeling like you're mitigating everything and just trying to hold the settlers at bay to a different kind of tone where you feel like they're on the ropes now and you are going to destroy them. There's a little bit of that in here, but it's only at the very, very tail end. Mostly it just feels like, oh, all of this could come crumbling down at any moment, and I hope I can survive long enough to make this happen. It's got more of a pandemic vibe, I guess. Mm-hmm. I never feel like a really awesome crew of rebels that are so hard-boiled or skilled or whatever that the superheroes should be afraid of me.
Right.
That's just a matter of taste. I love the feeling of being able to have big, strong, powerful turns.
Mm-hmm.
And this is more like a gaining a few inches at a time kind of a victory. That's not a fault of the game or anything like that, but that's just where I'm at. Overall, though, I think this is a really solid, tight, kind of classic co-op design with a Yahtzee mechanic. And frankly, I like the Yahtzee mechanic.
Yeah, it is. It's the thing that I always enjoy whenever it's in a game.
Yeah, I like it in King of Tokyo. It's probably the game that uses this mechanic that I play the most. And there was a part of me that sort of agreed with the early reviewers for The Reckoners that said, oh, this is a cool theme, but this is basically just cooperative King of Tokyo. There's sometimes a tendency in reviewers, and I'm sure that we are guilty of this as well, of just like reducing a thing to its most basic elements. But what's novel is I can't think of another game that uses the Yahtzee mechanic in a cooperative setting.
Right, yeah.
And I think it works really well.
Yeah, it works really well. It's very satisfying. It's a mechanic that everyone is familiar with.
Yes.
But it's still fun and satisfying to use.
Yeah, I think so too. And also, like, because it's satisfying, I really like that. I like responding to the roll and like having that decision of like, oh, which one do I keep? And I really like that they added the wrinkle of, hey, even if you don't really like everything that you rolled, you do have to keep at least one thing.
Yeah, it's a nice little choice. And it changes how you're like, okay, we'll have to keep one. I guess I'll bank on this. Whereas like normally you would just reroll everything. And I don't know, it just has an interesting effect on your turn and your approach to your turn overall.
I think so too. And it also means that because that base mechanic is pretty simple, managing two characters to play the game solo is a little easier than playing some cooperative games where you have to control two characters.
Yeah, it makes it easier, and the fact that it's simultaneous and you can technically do in whatever order you want to as you bounce back between them. It definitely makes it more manageable. It doesn't feel that bad. I don't know if like playing this in a multiplayer setting and only controlling one hero would really feel like any less of a mental load.
Yeah, that's a good point. I really don't like controlling two characters. I've made that pretty clear on here before. And there are a few reasons for that, like it detaches me thematically a little bit. Something about this theme and about how you're controlling a team of people already makes that a little more palatable for me here. The idea that I need to control two or more characters to play this solo, but also just the fact that like rolling dice and picking which dice to keep is pretty simple. To me, makes this work really easily. Yeah, and like the real-time thing, that makes this feel so much better. Like I don't have to plan through my entire turn with this character, then move over to this other one. I can just sort of say like, oh, we're going to need more research here. You know, we're going to need to do this here. And you can just do it. That feels great. I really like that. And to kind of focus in on the solo play of this a little bit more, that is for me what makes this a pretty satisfying solo experience. The fact that I can just sit here and have some sense of collaboration between two different characters without it feeling like a big mental load and without the game taking that long or being that heavy makes this a pretty satisfying, I'd say solidly mid-weight experience.
Yeah, I would say so. Very solidly mid-weight.
Yeah, and one that looks beautiful. So I have really enjoyed my plays of this. The only thing I would say, if you're interested in this, is just to know this game is really freaking hard.
I think I was like, I like the components, and that's like, oh yeah, this will be fun. I was like upbeat about that. Getting through the rules was very simple and easy, and I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, I'm just going to do these things. I'm going to attack these epics, then I'll fight against the big main guy, all this stuff. And then I started doing it, and I started not doing well.
It's pretty brutal, especially the first several turns when you feel like, okay, I don't have enough equipment yet to be doing all these combo chains with my dice. I really need to focus on building up my character probably to make this work over the long term. But that means you are falling behind very rapidly.
Yeah, the bad guys ramp up very quickly with them getting out. Just their powers faster, the enforcers or whatever they're called, going through. I mean, just all of it. All of it's so bad and it goes up so fast.
Yeah, and then before you know it, they put out a barricade or something where suddenly you can't get into this one region that you really need to get into to start taking care of some of the bad guys there. And like, oh boy, it snowballs very quickly. There are lots of ways to adjust the difficulty level in this game, which is really nice. And you do it primarily just by popping out Steelheart's board that shows you all of his stats. It comes with like 3 or 4 different boards.
I think it's 6 maybe of like, well, there's the alternate ones and then there's like the big one.
Oh, right. Yes. Just to like help you adjust the difficulty to exactly what you want it to be. To me, it feels like I will stay on the low level difficulty for this for a while. Because I'm either not good at this game or it's just super hard.
Yeah.
But if you did get to a place where you started to beat it, it has a lot of room for growth, I think. Really, the only downside to this as a solo game for me is just that each play doesn't feel that different. There's kind of a rhythm to it where you're going to get some more gear. You're going to go take care of the epics. You're going to maintain things until you finally get to a place where you can start hitting Steelheart. There aren't other villains that feel or behave differently than Steelheart. You're going to see the same epics over and over again. It's going to be pretty much the same game to game.
With the epics that you're fighting, while they all have different kind of powers and they unlock it different ways and stuff like that, there's not really like a theme that is like, I guess, that you can perceive through the like the powers that they have or they're using, or at least maybe that's because I'm not familiar with the actual source material, but it's just icons and stats and things like that. And that's what I'm paying attention to. The theme is really lost on the epics. They're just a different stat block to deal with.
Yeah, I think that's true. It doesn't feel bad or like overly abstract to me or anything like that.
Right.
But I just don't get sucked into it the way
right.
that I do in other games. Yeah. So I feel like there's probably more that we could say about this game and how it plays. But I feel like we're in a good place where we can start to wrap up the review here by talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly for this game. I'll say here, this was a game that was a gift that I got through the Board Game Geek Secret Santa. And I actually, I didn't ask for it, I don't think. I don't think it was on my wish list. I think they heard us talk about this game on the show at some point because they realized that we did the show and they listened and heard me mention it. And it was kind of a surprise to see it in the box. I was pleasantly surprised by this game when I played it. It is a nice, fun, enjoyable game.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I wasn't dreading this game by any means, but like I wasn't necessarily looking forward to it. But as I started taking it out and like setting it up and reading the rules and everything, I was like, oh no, this looks way cooler than I expected it to. It looked like it was going to be more fun than I expected it to be.
Yeah, like the theme and the components for me make this game intriguing, and not just like for your first play. When I'm trying to decide what game to play and I'm looking at my shelf and I see that box, I think about what's inside there and I'm like, oh yeah, that's different. Like that feels different to me, and like it still makes me want to get out and play it just knowing what it looks like in there. And just knowing like there aren't games with this theme.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, it just feels cool and different in that way. And then I would also say another positive for this game is that is balanced by a core mechanic that is very familiar. And so it's not like you have to wrap your head around this weighty rule set and like try to remember all the weird peculiarities of this game to get it out and get it to the table. It feels familiar and fresh at the same time. And I really like that.
Mm-hmm.
Sets up quickly, plays relatively quickly. I've never had a bad time when I was playing this game.
Yeah, I would agree with all that.
The other thing that I would say here, and this may or may not be a positive for you depending on what kind of solo gamer you are, but this game plays 1 to 6 players. And normally if I were to see a co-op game like this and see that it played up to 6, I would say like, I would probably not do that. I don't think I feel that way about this game. Because everybody's taking their turns simultaneously, I've not played this with 6 players. But I would imagine that it would not be like a lot of downtime or like take a lot longer to play or anything like that. It's a pretty versatile game.
Yeah, I would imagine that it scales pretty easily if you are actually adding a bunch of players like that.
Yeah, and there aren't that many games that play up to 6 players without just getting totally out of hand time-wise.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're the kind of person who plays games solo sometimes and likes to do that and has fun doing that, but also needs something that will work well for a game night, I think this is probably a good choice for you. Like if the people you're playing games with can get into some nerdy themes like trying to kill superheroes, I think this will appeal to a wide range of folks. People who like co-op games, people who like cool components, people who don't want to play something overly heavy but still want to make meaningful choices. I just feel like this game has really broad appeal.
Yeah, I would go along with all that.
And some of that is probably colored by the fact that I like the books.
Yeah, I think I would agree with all that, and I'd be down for playing this game some more. But yeah, the theme, I almost forget about the theme, and it's not the worst or bad thing. It's a fun game in there, but yeah, the theme I forget about pretty frequently. It's just kind of a thing that I know about it as I'm playing it. Yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah, I just mean like mechanically and visually and all that. I think it's pretty approachable for a lot of people.
Yeah, I would agree.
So all of that for me means that this is, I think, a very good solo game. It's not perfect. There's nothing that's glaringly wrong or bad about it exactly, but if I'm thinking about things that I would consider bad for this game, I would probably say, like we mentioned before, sometimes the research action feels kind of pointless for some of these epics in a way that just doesn't feel good. You know, when I can just hit this thing and do as much or more damage than researching it. Sometimes it makes that mechanic feel a little pointless. I do wish the games felt a little bit different game to game. Like there was something more fresh about each play.
Yeah, I feel weird saying that's a bad thing, especially because I haven't played the game enough to get to that point. But that's just kind of what I would, I guess, anticipate is get feeling like samey after so long.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, it doesn't feel... I don't want to undersell the difference between the characters, right? Because they do start with different starting equipment and they have different dice that they roll, like with different emphases. So you're going to have to think through how you approach beating the epics a little bit differently, you know, because you're going to have different strengths. But it's not enough to make it feel like a wildly different experience.
Right.
So it's not an ugly thing or even really a super bad thing. It's just, if I was going to put it somewhere, that's probably where I would put it.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that I would say is bad for me as the kind of player that I am is I like the idea of reducing randomness on the AI's turn, but how you have to math through everything while you're taking your turns, and that being such a big part of the game, appeals to me a little less than I'd like.
Yeah, the randomness mostly comes, or not mostly, almost entirely comes from just the roll of your dice. And I mean, I really love having dice as a resource, for your turn and things like that. That's great. But that's where it's basically all of the randomness is coming from. It would be nice if there's maybe a little bit more with the actual like board against you or something like that, not just your kind of action resource.
Yeah, I agree with all that. It's not terrible or anything like that.
Not at
but
all.
If you're the kind of person who gets hung up trying to think through every eventuality, like Carter,
Yeah.
you can get bogged down on that pretty easily,
Mm-hmm.
I think. Or when you miss it and you miss one of those things and the AI's turn happens and you go, like, this was right in front of me and I should have seen this and I didn't plan for it. That makes me feel dumb. Whereas if I do my best in Pandemic or something and then the cards are flipped and the bad stuff happens, like, there's an element of that that's just like, I didn't know exactly what was coming.
I'm clearly not at fault. I'm not the stupid one.
Right.
I just got unlucky.
That's my point, is I want to be able to blame my bad performance on the game.
Right.
I can't do that here and it feels bad.
Yeah.
But that's really the only thing I would say. And again, that's just a taste issue for me. I don't think there's anything ugly about the game at all.
Yeah, I can't really think of anything.
At the end of the day, for me, this is not a game that I love, which is one of the requirements of this stamp of approval.
Yeah.
I will say it's a game that I like.
Yeah, it's a game I like. I will definitely play it again in the future if it's around. I just don't love it.
Yeah, I don't either. I do think that a lot of people will love this game. I think if you really like the Reckoner's source material, you're going to get more out of this than people who haven't read it. And if I'm trying to think about who this game is for, I wouldn't say that the solo gamer who plays solo games almost exclusively is like the target audience for this game. I would say if you're the kind of person who plays sometimes with a group, plays sometimes with people who don't like heavy games, plays with people who like co-ops, sometimes likes to play a little bit solo, that person will probably find this game to be a really nice addition to their collection. But that's not really where I'm at right now. So at the end of the day, I can say this is a really good game. It's fun to play. If somebody asked me to play it, I'd be up for it. But I don't think it's like Hall of Fame kind of material. That is the end of this review. If you haven't heard yet, we are a member of the Dice Tower Network. And what that means is if you like this show and you want to learn more about board games and you want to find more shows about the kind of games that we're talking about here, you can go on to dicetower.com and see a list of other shows in the network and find other shows that would probably fit your taste really well and help you fill that podcast-shaped hole in your heart. So if you haven't yet, go on to dicetower.com and find out more about those shows. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. If you don't already, you can see the pictures that we post about what we're playing or what we're griping about today. You can go on there and follow us and check all that out. If you haven't yet, rate or review the show on iTunes. A lot of you all have done that, and it's been super helpful. If you have just a few minutes, go on there and do that if you haven't already. Last thing, we mention every episode, if you would like a Board Game Geek micro badge, we have our own Solosaurus fan micro badge, and we would be happy to provide you with one for free. So if you would like one of those, just send me a message on Board Game Geek, and I'll get one sent out to you right away. But that's all we've got for this episode, folks. Until next time, I'm Brandon Waite.
And I'm Carter Mackey.
And this is Solosaurus.